So as gun violence continue to plague communities around the world, particularly in the United States, and to talk about that in context of gun violence in US, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu from Center for Global Affairs in New York University joining us live on this broadcast. Thank you very much, Professor Sidhu. Such a pleasure, sir, talking to you always. So first things first, the FBI is investigating the incident as an act of terrorism, but it believes that it doesn't have, and it believes that the driver acted alone. But then they're still, probing for some more evidence to get a clear picture. But first of all, what do you think of this, the timings of it, and whatever the US media is reporting in terms of the findings of the investigative agencies?
Well, good to be with you again, and thank you for having me. And of course, this has not been a very peaceful start for the new year. But as we've seen, these kind of attacks have not been, are not unusual. We've seen them over the holiday markets in Europe. There was also a similar ISIS threat to the Taylor Swift concert in Austria, which actually had to be cancelled. So I think certainly the timing of this has to do with, in many ways, ISIS trying to just literally and figuratively wave the flag that they are still very much a force to contend with. And that's, I think, a very important message. Also, the timing of this, with the change in or the transition of the administration from the Biden to the Trump, may also be another reason why this timing is crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a bit more on the change of guard, which is on the anvil. In fact, it's already happened. It's just a matter of a few days officially when Donald Trump takes over as the president of the United States of America. But then what does this really suggest? The timings of the attack, and there is a pattern to it. I mean, in the last, 48 hours, we're looking at 3 such onslaughts.
Absolutely. Although I would probably discount or not include the New York attack in this one. We don't seem to have enough information about that. But there is certainly a possibility that the Las Vegas attack and the New Orleans one may be related, although there are also some significant differences there as well. For example, the ISIS flag was not found in Las Vegas. But that being said, I mean, quite clearly, there may be presidents who come in wanting to not focus on foreign policy, but very often events like this will force that onto the agenda. We saw this, for example, in the case of 9/11, where President George W. Bush had a very different agenda when he came to office, but then actually went on to launch the global war on terror. Similarly, the incoming administration of President Trump has not been very keen on engaging on foreign policy issues in general, but also terrorism in particular. But the fact that if there is terrorism on American soil, then clearly, he and the administration will have to respond.
What about the gun culture, gun lobby? In the sense, has there been enough administrative work aimed at reducing gun violence, or the pattern of it, including passing the most significant gun safety legislation in the nearly 30 years, from successive administration, from one campaign to the other, the gun lobby, the gun culture, all of that has been, one of the rallying points. But then what also we have seen in last so many decades, such incidents making it to global headlines. But nothing seems to be stopping this.
No, absolutely. And in that sense, the United States seems to be in this very unusual situation. People who support, for example, the Second Amendment, people of the National Rifle Association, for example, which is the right to bear arms, will probably argue that the laws are going too far. But for those, who are concerned about this gun violence and really starting the new year with this mass atrocities, although, guns were only used in New York in this particular case, just underlines that how much more sort of needs to be done and is honestly not being done enough, and that's a tragedy. Also, you might remember there is also the attack, which was what is complicating the situation more is now the role of so-called ghost guns which are being made using 3D printers, and this is what
Okay.
we saw in the attack on the CEO of United Health, who was killed in New York.
Okay. I was just reading, there are states who have also been, mulling over, they've taken steps to pass their own gun legislations. Do you think in the context of United States and the change of guard or the Trump administration taking over, now is the time to give a very hard look or relook at passing some stiff gun legislations?
One would hope so, but I think certainly, those hopes are probably going to be belied by the Trump administration, which is much closer to the National Rifle Association, the NRA, and concerns about gun control as well. Besides, even if there is, even if the federal government tries to do more, some of the states have their own sort of policies. But some of the attacks in New York in particular, many of these guns are coming from out of the state. So, for example, New York has some very, very strict laws related to guns. But the shooting and the assassination, which happened, by this young man Mangione, was actually, from Pennsylvania. And he made the gun there, which was not traceable, and then brought it into New York as well. So it is unfortunate, but I think just to add to the pessimism of the start of the new year, I don't think we can expect very much.
Okay. There's also this talk going on about there could be laws coming into effect in the year 2025 in US. What are you picking up? Like, what's the general banter?
Well, as we've seen, there's going to be some pushback on a lot of the Biden administration laws as well, particularly related to the environment and energy, but also in terms of government regulation as well. But I think we're starting to see some very interesting tensions already within the Trump camp, as it were. One of them relates to H-1B visas, which I know is of great interest and concern to countries like India as well. So there are some who are very supportive of that measure, but others who are thinking that this is actually taking away American jobs from Americans.
Yeah.
And therefore they need to have a pushback on that as well. So it's going to be a very interesting year.
One final question. In 2024 alone, I was just looking at some database maintained by the Gun Violence America. They are saying that there have been nearly at least 500 mass shootings, and the deadliest, of course, being the one which took place in Chicago suburb in January, killing 8 people. You think there's going to be now some pressure on Donald Trump when he takes over in few weeks to do something substantial, like some iron fist policy to ensure that this stops? Terror attack or no terror attack, but gun violence, vehicle attacks, all this has been like an order of the day there in the US from different parts of the country.
Right. Donald Trump is proved to be immune to pressure. We've seen that in the first administration, but also that's something that, we might see here again. But we might see a different kind of response, as it were, from Donald Trump, which may be, and again, you can see parallels with this first administration. He may, for example, evoke a Muslim ban, a ban of, sort of people coming in from Muslim countries. And that, of course, is not going to stop the kinds of attacks in New Orleans, where, the perpetrator was an American citizen, radicalized, possibly online, and those are the kind of new challenges that they're going to face. It is possible that they might do more about radicalization online, but let's not forget that while we're focusing on this attack, with links to the Islamic State, we also have equal attacks or equal amount of concern with right-wing white supremacists who've also been radicalized online as well. So I think, you may see the Trump administration trying to nuance between the two, and I think that's going to be part of the problem as well, because it's not going to solve the problem to have this piecemeal approach. We need to have a much more, comprehensive approach.
We'll leave it there. Such a pleasure talking to you, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu from Center for Global Affairs in New York University, joining us live on, and of course, sharing your thoughts on this very, very critical matter. Thank you, sir. Thank you.